Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. Tonight, the latest on 2 ongoing strikes impacting local workers. Plus, police are calling her a hero. We'll hear how this woman flipped the script on a pair of potential scammers. A phenomenon up in the sky. These 2 bright lights caught eyeballs across our region last night. We will tell you what they are. Plus, Kelly Whitney is featured in a new mural in Windsor. We'll tell you how she made history. Hundreds of workers at 2 large employers in our region continue to strike tonight. And as that's happening, some non-unionized workers are crossing picket lines. Striking workers say there's no end in sight, and they tell CBC's Jason Vio they're starting to feel the financial pinch.
It's been 2 weeks since the 250 workers at the Windsor salt mine went on strike. They mine and produce food-grade and rock salt. Yesterday, a court injunction filed by the company came into effect, preventing workers from blocking non-unionized workers crossing the line to do their jobs.
If anything, it's a little bit more upsetting now than in the past.
It's getting to be a little depressing, yeah, just seeing that happening.
They're fighting an attempt at union busting.
Today, the MPP for Windsor West pushing for the provincial government to pass what she calls anti-scab legislation.
Well, we're proud of our labor relations in this province. 99% of deals are done at the table.
So what do you make of that?
Speaker,
It's somebody from the outside looking in, and and they can talk and say what they want to say, but unless they're at the table and they don't see what type of negotiations are taking place, it's just all like hearsay. 99% of the time the contracts are settled at the table, but when the other person's not showing up to the table, it's hard to get anything done.
The union previously told CBC News the salt mine owners, Stone Canyon, won't talk about pay increases until they agree to allow non-union workers to fill some jobs. The company has said they're committed to negotiating a fair agreement, but there's no word on when talks may resume. In Leamington, a similar concern with a sign out front saying Scab City as trucks cross the picket line. Here, roughly 400 workers have been on strike for 3 weeks now. Many of these workers have been here for several years, some even when it was the Heinz plant.
We just wish the strike would be over,
Now they're fighting for a better wage. Being on the picket line comes at a cost, reduced pay and no benefits.
Well, I'm losing about, if we do it for like $200 a month. It's kind of hard because my mortgage just went up $80 a month this year.
Definitely my overbalance, my overdraft every week. I think we're all pretty worried about it. We do want fairness here, but also I don't think we want to be out here for another 8 weeks.
Bills would definitely get tough. I might have to look into going somewhere else, honestly, depending on if it's going to be a long strike, but I have hope that we'll be back in soon.
The United Food and Commercial Workers Union that represents these Highbury-Canco workers says they haven't heard anything from the employer. They didn't return our calls today, but the owner previously said he was surprised employees went on strike, saying that wage increases were put on the table. Workers at both Windsor Salt and Highbury-Canco say they're going to remain here until a deal is reached. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Police are celebrating a Windsor woman for her help catching a pair of potential fraudsters. She got a call from someone she did not recognize, claiming to be her grandson. But Bonnie Bednarik pulled a fast one on the suspected scammer.
And I said, oh, and I said a name that wasn't my grandson. And then it just progressed from there, where I bought some time to call the police. And the fraud unit came out to the house. And we were able to set everything up. I was able to keep him on the line. He called back. He wanted $9,300. So I led him on. And I was so happy to hear that they caught him.
Police are calling Bednarik a hero. They arrested 2 young men, both charged with fraud. Here's advice from police on how to avoid this kind of scam.
I tell my parents all the time, if they don't know who is at the door or who is on the phone, why engage it? What's the worst that's going to happen? Nothing. Or if someone shows up on your front porch, call us. We have patrol units that are out in all areas of the city. Call. We'll come by.
With these kinds of cases, justice doesn't always mean repayment. Reporter Angelina King now with a look at what happens in the rare instances when a fraudster gets caught.
Ontario is dealing with a huge fraud problem. Police investigations only lead to convictions a small fraction of the time. So when someone is found guilty, you'd think the victim would feel a sense of justice or closure. But that's not really the case. It's nearly impossible for fraud victims to get all their money back through the criminal court. They have better luck hiring a civil lawyer, but that costs more money. And just because a fraudster is ordered to pay their victim back doesn't mean that they do. In the last decade, less than a quarter of convicted fraudsters were ordered to pay their victims restitution. And since 2010, fraudsters have been ordered to pay nearly $500 million in Ontario. But unlike some other provinces, Ontario doesn't actually track how much has been paid to victims. The Ministry of the Attorney General told us that's because some offenders repay victims directly, others through the court, and others pay through the province. But the government doesn't actually enforce any of these orders. Instead, it's left entirely up to the victims, who then have to take the case to the civil court on their own or pay for a lawyer to help, all for the chance of just getting the money that they're owed.
It's not right. How am I supposed to try to make him pay money back? Like the courts, the police, like those are the people in charge, the government. If this was a sentence that he was given, why isn't it being followed through with?
Karen Smith thought she was investing her money so she could pay off her mortgage a little bit quicker. Instead, the $70,000 of equity she took out of her home went right into the pocket of Daniel Reeve. He was convicted of defrauding Smith and 40 others out of $11 million in total. In 2018, he was given the maximum sentence for his crimes, 14 years, but he only served a fraction of that. And while Smith was working late nights to pay her bills, Reeve was let out on parole. But it was revoked after he was found to be pushing a new pyramid scheme. Still, to the shock of victims like Smith, he was released in 2020 after successfully appealing his sentence and for being given credit for the time he spent in custody while awaiting trial.
It changed my life completely. Between my ex-husband and I separating, marriage over, change of work completely, went from working in home early in the evening to having to take a full-time night shift position just in order to save my home, and the emotional toll and being embarrassed.
Reeve was ordered to pay Smith and other victims restitution, even though the judge said there's no likelihood that would happen. And Smith hasn't seen a penny.
Just having the onus placed on victims and letting them figure it out themselves is just, it's not the way to do it. We're just re-traumatizing victims. In order to see how something is working and to really create improvement and move forward and get more help and support for victims of fraud, I think the first step is to actually figure out what we are dealing with. So keeping tabs, having those statistics at hand would be huge, and it would be the first step.
So it's unlikely victims will get their money through the criminal system, but it's at least supposed to deter fraudsters and bring some sort of justice to victims, but that's not really happening either. If victims are looking for punishment, it's usually not that harsh. In the last 10 years, only 32% of people found guilty of fraud had to spend time behind bars. More than half of them were sentenced to a month or less in jail, and just a sliver of them were sentenced to 2 years or more in prison.
If you're intent on a life of fraud, deterrence doesn't seem to be much of an impact.
So let's say there is a victim and it has been investigated, person's convicted, restitution's been ordered. What do you usually see after that?
Most cases, the money's long gone. So restitution orders are rarely an effective way to recover. They simply take too long. and the money is dissipated either on defense lawyers or they just convey their money to third parties. It should start through the civil courts. If we can actually start tracing money and try to freeze assets, even before the bandit knows that his gig is up, that is the best chance of recovery.
But it's expensive to hire a lawyer, and Norman Groot says in Ontario, it's not really worth it unless the person has lost more than $250,000. But there are restitution programs that are working quite well in Canada. Saskatchewan, for example, tracks how much is paid and helps victims get their money. And the feds are looking at a report that recommends the entire country agree on ways to help victims get the restitution that they're owed. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
Wheatley residents heard recommendations from officials about possible next steps following an explosion that rocked the downtown core a year and a half ago. Some of the recommendations include the need for ongoing monitoring of the Wheatley site and to review water and gas wells in the area. One of the reports indicated that there's gas in the underground rock that holds groundwater under Wheatley. Also, that monitors could be placed in people's homes. Now, most of these recommendations were for the municipality and Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. I spoke with Chatham-Kent's Director of Public Works about what happens next.
Both the municipality and our partners have to take these recommendations away and plan next steps. And the reason I say that, some of the recommendations are, very quickly implementable, such as the need to do further testing, which is ongoing. Whereas some of the recommendations, for instance, regarding reviewing water wells, those are larger kind of regulatory changes that need to be discussed between not only the municipality and our council, but the various ministries that are in charge of those various areas. So I said the word partners because that's a really broad word, because it involves a lot more than just the municipality and the MNRF.
How did community members who were there last night respond to the recommendations that were outlined?
So I think it was, they were very technical reports. And so I think it was a lot for everyone to digest. I think it went well. I think some of the words from residents were that they really appreciated and they were happy we were at a point to share these recommendations. I don't think all these recommendations are what they or even the municipality wanted to hear exactly. But I think at least there was some closure in having the meeting. We can start talking about these recommendations and talking about the future. That was very clear from the meeting last night, that the residents of Wheatley want quickly a path forward to how do we get our community back to normal. And I think that message was well received by the group.
A live look outside there. There is a system coming through, and Colette Kennedy will explain it all after the break. something strange in the sky last night? Two bright lights over Windsor's skies. And no, they were not UFOs. They also weren't stars. They were Venus and Jupiter, popping out for a yearly phenomenon when the planets align in the sky.
They were only about a moon's width apart from one another. That's about half a degree, okay? And that's the closest they got to each other. When they get to their closest point to one another, we call that a conjunction.
It's a conjunction that has one young Windsorite very excited, and for that, I have Esri Pook here with me. Esri, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Thank you for talking to me about the planets. I hear that you got really excited when you saw what was going on in the sky last night.
Yes. It was like in the middle of the night. I don't know what time it was, but like 9:30 or something when I saw it.
And what was it like when you saw it? What went through your mind?
I just saw two planets. I was too distracted of it. I didn't think of anything.
Right. But you also, you made a noise, didn't you?
Yeah, I screamed.
And why did you want to scream?
Because I was just excited to actually see it.
Why is this so special?
Because I just like the solar system.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Esri. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And if you missed the conjunction last night, there is still time. You'll be able to spot the planets over the course of the next month. So make sure you keep looking up. Colette Kennedy with us now for a look at weather. Colette, you've been telling us about this system that we should be preparing for, and it looks like it is time.
Yes. Yeah, today was a good prep day, timing-wise, but if, okay, you didn't quite get there with whatever you needed to do or pick up or pack up tomorrow morning, you should be okay, but as we get closer to the lunch hour, we're going to see things changing. So I'll take you through that timeline and what to expect here in a moment. Right now, just showing you what's happening with our current temperatures. 4 degrees, Windsor, 3 for Chatham, Kent, and Sarnia at 1, but, you know, those temperatures will be falling off overnight tonight. So we're headed to -5. No, the winds, they're not terribly strong, but there's still going to be a wind chill factor in here. So say it's going to feel like -7 or so. I mean, it's close to seasonal, but just a little bit of a change here where we're going to have some cold air move in. We do have a special weather statement that runs all along the north shore of Lake Erie and back towards the Windsor area for the storm coming in. And the reason it's a special weather statement, as opposed to perhaps the winter storm warnings, like the areas in red, or watches in the areas in yellow, is because it does appear like it will be more of a mix that will keep some of the snowfall accumulations down. It's likely going to start as some snow in the Windsor area before it changes or gets quite sloppy. Keep in mind the winds are going to be really strong with this system out of the east, gusting over 60, even over 70 kilometers an hour. So what wet snow there is, those flakes will be blowing around, reducing visibility. It is not going to be good on the roadways from about the lunch hour, but especially into the afternoon and evening for tomorrow. And then we'll see this moving out of here. I know there's nothing really to see here tonight. That's a good thing if you want to check out the conjunction again, but just to have a look at what happens. There it is, noontime. So starting off with some wet snow, you see where that mix line is. It's very close to the lake shore there. So even though this model is keeping it all as snow, I think we are going to see that holding down some of the accumulations a bit. But don't get me wrong, we're still looking at perhaps 10 centimeters through the area, 10 to 15 if you go just a bit north. And then it's getting much more significant heading towards the north and northeast, where there will be pockets that will see 20 to 30 centimeters, maybe even a few areas getting over that 30. So a look at where the action is, where the winter storm warnings are, but a really close call here. 10 to 15 I have for Sarnia, but Chatham, Kent, back through Windsor, really challenging, because we don't know exactly, I'm not exactly sure how long it'll be a mix and how long it'll be snowfall, but I'm going to say that we're likely going to be around that 10 centimeters, but really sloppy stuff because it will be eventually mixing. Now, your timeline here is that overnight Friday, there's going to be improvement. I think we're actually going to get into some sunny breaks into Saturday, maybe not a whole lot of sunshine, but drying out. So early Saturday, maybe still something around, but other than that, it moves on, and 4 degrees, then 6 degrees, a lot of melting of what we have will be occurring.
Okay, well, we will check back in with you tomorrow night to see how it moves.
Yes.
Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
when we come back. Kelly Whitney is a local icon. We'll tell you why you should know her name. Stay with us. A Commons committee continues to dig into allegations China interfered in Canada's last two federal elections. The accusations came to light in media reports that were based on leaked documents from Canada's spy agency, CSIS. The agency's director was one of the people who testified today, and those leaks became the focus of questioning.
The bread and butter of an intelligence organization is our ability to collect secrets and keep secrets and use those secrets, with the appropriate people. When that ability is threatened, it undermines the confidence of our partners domestically and internationally. And this is something we take very seriously. But I would say it's also the ability of to protect our people and our sources, people who put their lives at risk.
David Vigneault also said he agrees with an independent review of the 2019 and 2021 elections. It said there was evidence of foreign meddling, but it wasn't significant enough to compromise the votes. I want to now introduce you to a woman who left her mark here in Windsor more than a century ago. Her name is Kelly Whitney, a woman the Essex County Black Historical Research Society says is the first Black woman hired by an Ontario public school board. You might have seen her over on Erie Street, where she's been celebrated with a mural that was unveiled last week. Here's historian Irene Moore Davis, who also happens to be Whitney's descendant, on her legacy.
She's a name that not enough people know, I think. We were so happy when the artists that we selected to work on this mural project for the McDougall Street corridor decided that she should be one of the people featured. So it's great that people coming into Windsor Eats and exploring this area of the Via Italia and McDougall Street corridor portion of our city will be able to learn about her, see her picture, look her up, find out more about this amazing woman. She excelled as a student, and in 1913, when the Windsor Board of Education was looking for some teachers, her former principal from Windsor Collegiate Institute recommended her and really indicated very much throughout the letter that this was a person of African descent, although that's not the language he used at the time. And if they were willing to try a person of African descent, they should give her a shot. So she was given a shot, and in 1913, she became the first Black woman employed by a public school board in Ontario. She had an opportunity to really bring excellence in the classroom. She worked at Mercer Street School in the McDougall Street corridor with children who had not always had access to fantastic educational opportunities, especially from anyone who looked like them. So she instilled a lot of pride. She took a great deal of interest in her students personally. They were often people from the neighborhood in which she had grown up as well. And she was just a really great role model. So eventually she moved to Toronto and married J.R.B. Whitney, and there she was involved in his newspaper, The Canadian Observer, which was one of the most important instruments of the Black press in Canada in the early 20th century. They then moved to New York, where he continued editing newspapers, and she became a social worker. And in New York, she was responsible for setting up a series of senior centers in Harlem, as well as establishing a number of other services, working in foster agencies focused on the good and welfare of kids of African descent, and so on. So she's really looked upon in the New York area as a leader and one of their hometown heroes, but she's really from here.
We spent a lot of time focusing on the asylum seekers here in Windsor. Some of the hundreds that have arrived are staying at Matthew House. It's a temporary shelter for refugees. Tomorrow, we'll share their stories in their own words and how not all crossed into Canada at Roxham Road.
Everything about Windsor is just easy. When I was coming to Windsor from Toronto, they said I was crying. I don't want to come to Windsor. I was just crying. I said, oh, but they call me Candy, you have to go to Windsor. Actually, I was crying. I don't want to. I was just crying. So when I was inside the train, I was still crying till I arrived at Matthew House. Matthew House, it's just so lovely. The Windsor.
And you can hear more of her story on Windsor Morning with Nav Nanwa, with further coverage on our website and back here on CBC News at 6 tomorrow night. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor, and you can, of course, always find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for watching and have a great night.